Hi, and welcome to the show where we share the stories of the many who intersect with our healthcare system but are rarely heard from. My name is Kevin Poe, founder and editor of KevinMD. Today on the show, we have Uchenna Ume. She's a trained pediatrician, and she has a non-traditional practice that she's going to tell you about. But first off, Uchenna, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Nice to finally meet you.
It's very exciting. It's very exciting. So tell me a little bit about your story and your journey to where you are today.
So I'm a board certified pediatrician and I'm a mom. So I like to go by the word momatrician. I was born, bred, buttered, and slightly burned in Nigeria, but I'm happy to be here. I live in San Antonio, Texas right now with my 3 boys and 2 parakeets and a dog, and we're living happily ever after. I have 29 years under my belt of being a clinician, and 2 years ago, I made a hard left turn into the world of non-traditional medicine, like I mentioned, and I like to say I left penicillin pediatrics behind, and now I just practice preventative pediatrics. If there's ever been a way to prevent people from dying, it's suicide prevention. So, but it all started when in 2000, actually, believe it or not, when I was 7 months pregnant with my now 19-year-old son. A friend of mine who was also a surgical resident, she died by suicide. And that was my first contact with suicide ever in my life. And I was like, what? But, you just don't think, it's like, okay, this is once, it's a fluke. And then I had a 15-year-old boy die by suicide in 2000. And I was like, okay, now that's a patient of mine. But I still didn't think, anything. I didn't connect the dots until 2018 when a 7-year-old patient attempted suicide twice. I was like, okay, what's going on? Not necessarily remembering the fact that I myself had been suicidal when after my divorce, and I had financial crises and all kinds of messes that mess with your head when you have a divorce. But it wasn't so much of that. It was more of, why will a 7-year-old want to kill himself? Why would anybody want to kill himself? Like, it's like a child. And so I started looking into it, and the more I looked into it, the more I realized there's a reason why. It's called trauma. And so now I'm more comfortable in my knowledge, and now I'm trying to tell people about it. Because the biggest misconception about suicide is that it's a mental illness that's causing it. That is as I think of all the things that if I could fix something right now, it'd be that concept that mental illness is behind suicide. Mental illness is one of the 23 causes of suicide, but it's the one that everybody goes to, but it's not even the most common. Trauma is the most common. And so now that I know better, I'm trying to tell everybody about it. That's it.
Now, a couple of years ago, you left a traditional practice, and now you're doing something non-traditional to help spread your message. Share a little bit about that journey as well.
Well, the journey was really towards self-discovery. I mean, when I left medicine, I know enough of my friends. It was almost like a divorce, right? Everyone's like, are you crazy? Have you lost your mind? You want to raise 3 boys by yourself? Like, da-da-da-da-da-da. What could you have done? Same thing with medicine. Are you crazy? You want to leave a secure job where you're getting paid $200,000 a year and you want to do what now? People was like, what? And I was like, well, if I have to explain it to you, then basically you've missed the point. And actually a friend of mine took me to Starbucks right up the road, and he said, sit down and let me talk to you. Do you want to become a therapist? What's wrong with you? You're a doctor. We don't have enough time in 15 minutes to see a child that's truly suicidal. And so my practice is very unique in the sense that the patients make their own appointments. It's a direct primary care practice. It's like Netflix for your doctor, really. So it's a flat fee per month, and you can see me however number of times you choose. So my patients see me twice a day if they want to, or twice a month if they want to. It doesn't matter. It's the same flat fee. But the beauty of it is that they have my cell phone numbers. And I love that. I love the fact that they have my cell number because, case in point, several weeks ago, just about when this whole COVID-19 hit, I had a 19-year-old kid that had just attempted suicide. I did not know that. But what I know is that he called me on my cell phone and he was like, Dr. Lulu, I need help, because I go by Dr. Lulu. Dr. Lulu, I need help. I need help is what he said. And I just went into this mommy mode. I said, get out of the house is what I said. I screamed in the house and my son was like, what's that? I yelled so hard. I said, get out of the house. And he got out of the house and I said, come and see me right now. And within 15 minutes, he was in my office. Coincidentally, his mom stopped by for something. And then she noticed, she did a sign like this, and I looked and he had fresh rope marks on his neck. Now, the beauty of it is he did not call his mother. He called me. And I think for that phone call, my work is worth it, because he came to the office that day and I talked to him, and his parents chose not to put him in the hospital. And I actually agreed with it, because studies have shown that people who, suicidal teens specifically, the first 3 months after leaving the hospital have the highest rate of suicide within the first 3 months. We don't know why yet, but he didn't want to go to the hospital, and I gave him grace for that, because I know it's a very traumatic event. Usually you're fighting with the demons in your head, like literally the voice is telling you you're not good enough. And that is what we need to work with, versus here, take some antidepressants. In his case, his girlfriend broke up with him, and he felt so humiliated by that, because he thought it was all this and a bag of chips. She left him for someone else that he didn't even think was all that. That was the problem. So getting his mind out of that mindset of, you deserve better. He said, no, I don't deserve better. So he kept telling himself that, and that's why people kill themselves. And I want people to hear when I say there's no dose of Prozac that can fix that. Because generally he was okay before his girlfriend left him. And so one of the top 3 reasons why people kill themselves are financial problems, like now during the COVID-19, relationship problems, believe it or not, divorce. I knew I was suicidal after my divorce. Is a big, big problem. And of course, if a child has mental illness like ADHD, depression, or whatever, and they're not properly diagnosed, or they get substance abuse tossed in it and they have no support, yes, they can be suicidal. But primarily it's usually trauma. And for children, it's usually from bullying. And that's why when we went out of school, we had to be forced to stay at home. I said a prayer of thanks, because I knew there's a child out there that is thanking God they don't have to see that bully at school anymore. And for that, I was happy. But of course, after enough time, we now had an upsurge of cyberbullying, an upsurge of domestic violence, and all the things that happen when you're at home with the aggressor, if your own aggressor happens to be at home. So it's a double-edged sword. But I love it. I love doing it. I love doing what I'm doing.
Now, not everyone has a Dr. Lulu in their community who can really address these issues. Now, for those listening, what are some of the warning signs that you could share with my audience that their teens may be depressed or suicidal?
And that's a great question. The biggest problem is most of the warning signs in teenagers are normal teenage behavior, or they could pass for normal teenage behavior. The average teenager is not going to come and say, Ma, I want to kill myself. What they will say, though, the top 3 things a teenager who's suicidal will do, the first one is a major change in mood. Either they become more depressed or more sad, or they become more elated. When someone has made up their mind to kill themselves, they're relieved and they're happy, actually. It's a weird paradox, but it's true. And I'll tell you what, I had a guest on my podcast whose son did just that. When he died by suicide, they ruled nobody saw anything until she came on my podcast and I started asking her questions like, did he talk about dying? She was like, oh yeah, about 3 weeks before he died, he started asking me, where do people that kill themselves go? But what has that got to do with anything? I said, wait, hold up. Did he say anything else? Well, he asked his father if people that die go to heaven. Second point. And then wait, his poetry teacher noticed that his poems were really dark and took a dark turn. He didn't say anything. And then his lacrosse teacher noticed that his attitude had changed completely. He was happier. During a road trip specifically, he noticed that he was much more talkative than normal. The kid gave 4 signs, but nobody noticed it because nobody talked to each other. The father didn't talk to the mother. The mother didn't talk to the teacher. The lacrosse, you know what I mean? So all of them didn't say anything, but all of those are signs of suicidal behavior. The top sign, though, that a child is going to kill themselves is a child that has attempted suicide. They have the highest risk of suicide completion. The second high risk is family history of suicide, or an uncle or a brother or a parent. That's a high risk on a child. Again, think trauma. The trauma of losing a child to suicide, trauma of losing a parent to suicide, versus mental illness from losing a parent to suicide. Yes, you're sad, but before your parent died, you were okay. I want people to see that the question to ask is not, why do you want to kill yourself? Is what happened? Because 2 weeks ago, you were fine. This week, you lost your job. Your mother died by COVID-19, you are diagnosed with cancer or whatever. Something catastrophic happened and you let all of those thoughts win. And that's why you kill yourself. They get trapped. They feel hopeless and helpless and have no purpose. They're like, you know what? Nobody will notice if I die. They say things like that to themselves and then they believe it. So the top 3 signs for parents to listen to is a major change in mood. Even if the child suddenly becomes reckless, like he's driving really fast down the street with no seatbelt. And I say that because suicide is second only to accidents as a leading cause of death for kids aged 10 through 34. And I call 34 years kids because they're kids. 10 through 34, second only to accidents. Suicide kills children in that age group more than all medical diseases put together, including COVID-19. So when it's second only to suicide, or only to accident, the question to ask yourself is, what if those accidents, how many of them were really suicides? And that's the problem. So look for your child asking you questions about death, talking about death, writing about death, ruminating about death. A sudden change in behavior, giving away their prized possessions. If your child comes back from school with his best friend's favorite pair of glasses or favorite mug or whatever, you better find out what's going on with that best friend. Because people who love their stuff don't give their stuff away. This is a huge sign that's missed in parents. And I empower parents to have an open door communication with your child. Go in and look through their things. If a child acquires a means to kill themselves, i.e. a gun, they're going to use it. And if a child is writing in their journal, Miss Alexandra Valoras is a 17-year-old girl who died a few years ago. After she died, everyone now found out that she had a 200-page journal, 200 pages of nothing but self-loathing and bad. She's like, I failed, I'm a failure. But to the outside world, she was a class captain, she was lacrosse, she played music. Her father thought she was everything, except she did not think she was. And it was only after she made her bed one night, walked into the road and jumped off an embankment to her death that he found her journal. So it is easier for people to say, yes, then I need help. So ask the question. And I tell the parents, I came up with this word talk because the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention talks about talk saves lives. And I came up with a mnemonic for talk. T stands for tune in to the right radio frequency of your child. Tune in. In other words, notice your child, know when they are not acting okay. And don't just toss it into teenage behavior because you might miss that 2 seconds, that window, right? A is ask the question already. Most people think erroneously that if you ask about suicide, the child is going to become suicidal. You know, people say that all the time. No, if you ask a child who is struggling with that thought, believe it or not, they're going to be like, yes, mom, oh my God, yes. Or they might tell you, you know what, yes, I've been thinking about it. And then you ask them, do you have a plan? Then you now open the door. Do you have a plan? Would you like to talk to someone? Let me take you to get help versus, do you want me to help you? Because what's a teenager going to say? Right? And that's not the answer. They really want to say yes inside, but they're not going to say it. So TAL is when you ask the right question, you better listen. So I used the word lean in and listen. So when you lean in, what do? You're vulnerable. You close up the space. Your heart is closer. Your ears are closer. You're vulnerable. You're ready to accept what they're going to say. So ask the question and listen, right? And then K is keep open lines of communication. The studies have shown that suicidal teens who can identify one single trusted adult in their immediate environment will thrive. So every time a child kills themselves, that tells us that that child could not find one single adult to trust. And so I want you listening to me to be the one. Make the pledge today to be the one. And there's actually a hashtag be the one, which is about what I'm saying now. Be the one that the child can come to and trust enough to tell you that, you know what, things are not good. But don't rush to take them to a psychiatrist or a counselor or someone who's going to quickly put them on medication. See, that's 2 wrongs that don't make a right. And so I ask you to ask them again, what happened? Because generally the child will say, well, I've been bullied at school for months, or I've been raped, or whatever, I don't know. But they will tell you, usually there's trauma at the crux, at the core of suicide. And so that's what I wanted to say. And I'm sorry, I do talk for, can go on and on and on. But that's it in essence.
No, that's tremendously powerful advice. I'm a parent of teenagers, and a lot of my listeners are parents of teenagers as well. So you briefly touched upon this towards the end of that answer in terms of the next step. So let's say you recognize some of these signs. So what's the determination of when to get your child help? Where is that line where you need to bring in your child to see a psychiatrist or pediatrician? So where do you draw that line?
That's a great question. So first of all, a child who is suicidal is a cry for help. I want people to hear me. It's not a cry for attention, which is what people think. It's not attention seeking. It's a cry for help. After your child has killed themselves, it's not the time to start going back and saying, well, I wish I had known. If you hear about it, I want you to implore on your child. Say, please, I would like to take you to get help. Now, that's different from getting medication, because in 2015, the WHO actually declared the stigma of mental illness as a public health crisis. The stigma. And so people who are suicidal, that don't have a mental illness per se, they don't need that extra layer of stigma. You see what I mean? So for most providers, doctors, they're going to be quick to say, oh my gosh, she's depressed. Oh my gosh, she's not. Wait. Because if I'm being bullied at school and I'm skipping school and I don't want to go to school and I have a stomach pain every day, an antidepressant has a side effect of suicidal ideation. So be very careful before you jump to give them medication. Get therapy. Get a good therapist. Find one that actually connects with your kid. And they're out there. I mean, I don't know how long they've been suicidal, but now you've kind of stepped in. The child is relieved, I promise you, because now there's light at the end of the tunnel. It's not the time for you to panic. It's the time for you to calm down, sit down on the floor if you have to. And I usually jokingly say, take off your clothes if you have to. I want your child to see you vulnerable, see you present in the moment and intentional and mindful, and say, listen, I promise you, I'll get you help. Get them someone that they can talk to, that they can trust. Call Dr. Lulu. My number is 802-768-1180. Just take the number already. Dial 988. That is the National Suicide Hotline. 1-800-273-TALK. There's a warm body. There's a warm heart at the end of the phone that can talk to your child. Because the worst thing I want is for you to say the wrong thing when a child is suicidal. So don't engage. Even I would not want to engage with my son. When my son was having a little bit of crisis at Stanford when he was in school, he said, Mom, he was overwhelmed. He took a 21 credit, whatever, I don't know the term. He was overwhelmed with school. Schoolwork was a bit too much for him. Plus he was all the way in California and I live here in Texas. So he said, Mom, I had a little bit of suicidal ideation. He voiced it out to me. I didn't say, oh my God, we need to know. I said, okay. Let's talk about it. What happened? He said, well, and I went through all the things I'm thinking that could be causing it. It's not a relationship issue. Could it be academic? A lot of children are overwhelmed by academic pressures because their parents, the Nigerian parents, want everybody's child, all the kids must be a doctor until further notice. You must get straight A's. But what if the child is struggling at school? And so he said, well, he took 22 credits. It was a lot for him. What did we do? We dropped some of the credits and he was fine. So I need you to ask your child what is going on versus getting all reactive and rushing to the doctor. If you have a family history of anxiety and depression and all that, then maybe you should. So don't get me wrong. Mental illness is one of the, depression and anxiety are one of the symptoms of suicidal behavior, but I don't want you to jump on treating a symptom rather than the root cause. And that's, I think, the word I need to use. A symptom is not the root cause. A headache is not the root cause. Maybe a brain tumor is a root cause and you have a headache as a symptom. So same thing, when a child is suicidal is a symptom of something grave going on in the child. Maybe their pastor is molesting them. I don't know, but there's a block. And the child is feeling, I can't tell my mother. Maybe the child is gay. Maybe they're LGBT. They have the highest rate of suicide of all youth put together. Why? Because society ostracizes gay people. They feel like Well, it doesn't matter. Either way, no one is going to believe me. No one, I'm not going to, someone is going to kill me. There's homophobia. All of these things drive the child to kill themselves. That's what I want you to hear me, not give them medication. I keep saying that because the big pharma is who I'm having to fight with, because they've got a big voice and they've got the money. So right now I need to get to people's hearts so that maybe they'll hear me and not big pharma who is pushing Prozac every day. And people are, let me tell you something. In the last 4 years in America, prescription strength antidepressants have quadrupled. In the last 4 years in America, suicide rates have tripled. Is there something wrong with that math? Yes. And that's the problem.
Well, we're talking to Uchenna Ume. She's a pediatrician and an expert on teenage suicide. She wrote the KevinMD article, A Pediatrician's Healing Spirit, Treating Depressed, Anxious, and Suicidal Teens. You've given us such tremendous advice. What's your take-home message for the KevinMD audience?
Take-home message, if you think suicide, think mental anguish, not mental illness. That's it.
And how can people reach you?
Well, I live on Facebook, and I do have a book on teen suicide for all it's worth. It's called A Teen's Life. It's available on Amazon or on my website, which is teenalive.com. I have, just coincidentally, since all the mess has been going on, I have another book called How to Teach Your Children About Racism, which is basically breaking down what you should do and how you should talk to your child about racism and race relations. But generally, I hang out on Facebook. So if you go to Uchenna Ume, there are 9 of us with that first name and that last name. But I'm the only one with the middle initial L, as in love, right? So you can find me there. Otherwise, if you Google the word The Momatrician, M-O-M-A, Trician, T-R-I-C-I-A-N, you will see everything about me. I do go by Dr. Lulu, the momatrician, because I'm a mom and I'm a pediatrician. So that's it. So you can find me pretty much anywhere on social media and on KevinMD.
Thank you so much for your time and for joining me on the show.